Members of the Environment and Regeneration Committee, you're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of the E&R Committee, which will be held hybrid and meeting and conducted remotely via WebEx and physically in the Council Chamber in the Guildhall, Derry on London on Wednesday, the 12th of February 2025 at 4 p.m. And I will ask Karen to do the member attendance and apologies.
Thank you, Chair. Alderman Derek Hussey. Thank you. Alderman Keith Kerrigan. Yep. Alderman Julie Middleton, I think, is online.
Here, Karen, online.
Yep. Councillor Paul Boggs, online.
And Shaw, Karen Early.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor John Boyle. Councillor Caitlin Deeney is online.
Shaw.
Thank you. Councillor Alex Duffy. Ian is online. Councillor Sean Fleming.
Sean.
Councillor Emma McGinley.
Shaw, Karen.
Councillor Rory McHugh.
Shaw.
Councillor Pat Murphy.
Shaw.
Councillor Declan Norris. Councillor Martin Riley. And Councillor Brian Tierney. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Karen. Broadcasting statement. I would like to remind everyone physically present at this meeting or in attendance remotely that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. A copy of the Council privacy notice may be found on the Council website www.derrystaban.com. Members, next item is declaration of members' interests, and I know we have Councillor Boyle.
Thank you, Chair, and to declare an interest as a Commissioner of the Port and Harbour. And as a result of that, unfortunately, I'm in a position where I'll have to recuse myself from item number 5, which is the deputation. So at that point in the meeting, I will withdraw from the room. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Alderman Middleton.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in. I would also like to declare an interest in the topic covered in today's deputation as Commissioner for the Londonderry Port and Harbour. Chair, as I'm online, I will log off from the meeting. If there's any proposals, obviously I would abstain or not vote. So I'll take myself out of the meeting, and if I could be let back into the meeting when the presentation ends, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Middleton. Alderman Middleton, we can, or the technical team here can put you into the lobby effectively online there, so you don't have to log off.
Okay, that's super. If that can be done, that would be great. That. Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
All our members with the declaration of interest, members, we will, if there is something that you can raise it as we come to that item. At this stage, then, we will seek to bring forward item 5, and Councillor Boyle is going to step out, and Alderman Middleton will be placed in the lobby. And we will have a presentation now, and Mr. John Gormley from Save the Moat and Maeve O'Neill from the Environmental Gathering arising from the motion C45624. So, John and Maeve, if you can come forward. Thank you very much. You have 15 minutes to make your presentation to the committee, and then we'll have questions and answers afterward. Thank you.
I just go ahead now. Okay, thank you, councillors and aldermen, for having myself and John here today to give this presentation about the environmental and climate concerns about data centres. And Darryl, if you could put on to the next slide there. Oh.
Yeah.
There we go. Just to give an overview of the presentation today, we'll just introduce ourselves and the campaigns that we're part of, and just to give, then give a little bit of context about, you know, why we're talking about data centres here. And I'm going to focus on like looking at data centre growth around the world, but also across Ireland, and looking at like what that means from an energy point of view, from a water point of view, and looking particularly at the south of Ireland, and you know, lessons to be learned from there, and just tying that under the Climate Act that was passed here in 2022. Then John is going to then focus specifically on the data centre decision here in Derry and Strabane Council area, and like just to look at the different facts and figures around that. Darryl, next slide, please. So who we are, I'll let John introduce himself and save the moat whenever he's taken over. But I'm part of a gathering. It's a collective of different environmental campaigners from across the island. Many of them over here in the gallery here, but and you know, it's people from lots of different campaigns coming together to share experiences and support each other, but also to come together on common campaigns. Next slide, Darryl. So in terms of the context of why we're here today, we know that there was a data centre approved here for the Derry Strabane Council area just out of Campsite in September, and there's been outlined planning permission for 3 others. And you know, we're not here to overturn that decision, you know, as was discussed at the council meeting, but we are here to raise serious concerns on how the decision was assessed and scrutinised, and also to, you know, give an overview of like why we are concerned with from a climate and environmental point of view. Next slide, Darryl. So in terms of that, like context for data centre growth, data centres aren't anything new. You know, before I think that they would have been on a smaller scale, you know, at the bottom of office buildings and things. But, you know, data centres nowadays are something very different, and they're massive warehouses that are filled with servers, and they store vast amounts of data and provide the computation for virtually anything that you might interact with on the web. And I think right now data centres are experiencing a massive growth because of AI. And AI, again, is something that's been around for a little bit of a while, but it's generative AI, which has really taken off in the last few years, and there is a debate, obviously, about AI, and there's obviously benefits of AI, but there is drawbacks about AI and negatives about, you know, the uses and things of AI. But, you know, again, we're not here to discuss, you know, the pros and cons of AI, but it is something, you know, in the future that maybe should, you know, be discussed in our communities and in our public areas. But our internet systems and these, you know, data center systems, what they're built on is the model of collecting as much data as possible, whether we as citizens have given permission for that data to be collected. So there's a new term for the size of data centers now, which is a hyperscale data center, and that seems to be the dominant type of data center. When it comes to AI, an example between extractive AI, which would be like a normal Google search, and generative AI, which is like ChatGPT. Say you ask ChatGPT the same question as you would ask a Google search. ChatGPT would then like look at data from like from a wide range of information. But the consequences of that is that it takes 30 times more energy for the same task. So again, I don't think, you know, we're maybe thinking enough about, you know, the generative AI and the energy consequences of that, you know, in our daily lives. I think, you know, a lot of people are having a lot of fun with AI, but there's a lot of harm also being done with this type of generative AI. But nobody, I don't think, is really thinking about the energy consequences that comes from it. Next slide, Darryl. So in terms of data center growth globally, it's really taken off. The World Economic Forum has said that the computer power dedicated to AI is doubling every 100 days. And, there's 5 big tech companies who own most of these data centers, and Amazon is by far the largest emitter of these. The Guardian did an article there last year and some research on it, looking at the real emissions from company-owned data centers of Google, Microsoft, Meta, and Apple. So they didn't include Amazon because of it had different statistical variations, and they couldn't. But looking at those other 4 biggest companies, that in terms of their emissions and the stuff that they put out publicly, they're actually off by about 662%. So their emissions are higher than what they are putting out, and they put that down to creative accounting and things. So, like, again, the data that's going out there about data centers being renewable and relying on renewable energy, a lot of that data is actually skewed because it's coming from the energy companies themselves, or the big tech companies themselves. So the International Energy Agency stated that data centers already account for 1 to 1.5% of global energy consumption, which is massive if we take a step back and think about the fact that it's 1 to 1.5% of our full global energy consumption, and they account for 2% of global emissions. Now that's on a par with airplane travel, and if you think about the scrutiny that comes along with airplane travel, a lot of people have changed travel behaviours as a result of the climate impacts of airplane travel, but this is on a par with that, but I don't think the same scrutiny is being done about it. In the south of Ireland at the moment, it's now got 82 data centres. 14 are under construction and 40 more have been approved for planning. So I've got a slide later on kind of looking at the consequences of that. Next slide, Darryl. So looking at data centre growth here in the north. So there is, the Stormont have not provided any policy direction on data centres, which is not very helpful. There have been questions to the Minister on this, but nothing has been done about it. So there's no oversight from DFI, there's no direction from Stormont. Therefore, councils are having to make these decisions with no oversight or any impact, looking at the cumulative effects of data centres. And I know this data centre, it's been talked about a collection of data centres with Donegal as well, and there's like transboundary impacts of that, given the electricity grid. Next slide, Darryl. So this is just kind of looking at the real cost and consequences of data centres, and I'm going to focus on energy and water in the next 2 slides. But we can see that it'll impact on our net zero targets. It's got community and social impacts. A lot of these data centres globally are put up in more deprived areas that and some of them are having to generate their own electricity through gas, and obviously that there's been air quality consequences and things like that. There's a strain on renewable resources, which we'll talk about more, and the embedded carbon and the construction of this. But a lot of the renewable energy that is being utilised for these data centres is often built in areas of outstanding natural beauty, and John will talk more about that. Next slide, Darryl. So in terms of energy impacts, so data centres are huge consumers of both power and water. So when we think about the climate crisis and the transition towards renewables and looking at our own energy behaviours, and I know this council looks at energy saving and sustainability measures. So we know that the fundamentals of sustainability is about replacement and reduction, yet Adam, data centres are adding so much more demand to the electricity grid. And in some parts of the world, data centres' power demands have resulted in states actually scaling up fossil fuel production and generation rather than transitioning away from that. So an example of that is in the United States. And this obviously threatens our transition to a green and sustainable economy. I think when we look at the facts in the Republic of Ireland, you know, that'll be a lot more clear about the energy impacts. Next slide, Darrell. So in terms of water consumption, data centres are also gluttons for fresh water and require billions of litres to cool the servers in water-cooled systems. If you think about your laptop and you're like using your laptop and the fans in the laptop are trying to, cool to keep the computer systems cool, well, like think about that, like, you know, multiply by hundreds of thousands. So obviously there is, you know, that demand to keep these systems cool from a fire safety point of view, but also that they operate properly. And, you know, there's been many a discussion on here around our water supply, our water quality. You know, this is out in Campsie. Again, when we think about Campsie, we've got the River Foyle, the River Faughan. The River Faughan supplies our drinking water. The River Foyle has special protections. It's a transboundary river. So, you know, these are all considerations that, you know, we need to be thinking about when we're making decisions around data centres. Next slide, Darrell. So in terms of the south of Ireland, there has been unfettered data centre development in the south. In 2015, data centres only consumed, I'm saying only consumed, but they consumed 5% of all metered electricity in the south of Ireland. Now, in the figures were from 2023, they're consuming 21%. So that's a fifth of all the energy that is used in the Republic of Ireland is used now by data centres, and that figure is going to go up to projected to go up to 30% by 2030, which is only 5 years away. So data centres in the south use more power than every urban household in the country combined. So Meta has bought the entire output of two of the largest solar farms in Wexford and Meath, and Amazon owns wind farms in Cork and Connemara. And I think Amazon have looked about buying a wind farm in Mahara as well, or maybe they have bought it. You know, so this is what these big tech companies do to, you know, show their green credentials. But you know, when we think about where do we want this electricity to go, is, you know, should this renewable electricity be generated for our hospitals, for our schools, for our transport systems, for our homes, to, you know, because with renewable energy, there's always that hope that energy prices will go down. However, the growth of data centres is outweighing the growth of renewable energy. Therefore, we're continuing to stay dependent on fossil fuels, and you know, none of us, we're not actually meeting our climate targets as a result. So Irish electricity prices, what's the consequence as an ordinary people? They're the third highest in the EU, and they're 48% above average. So despite this investment in renewables, the pressure on the grid, this is what is happening. And there's been talk about power outages, particularly since the winter of 2022 in the south of Ireland. Yet these data centres have that status that the energy will definitely go to them, while ordinary households suffer from power outages. So there's been discussion in the south of Ireland looking at a moratorium on data centres, and there was a temporary moratorium looking at that given the power outages. But you know, but a lot more needs to be done north and south to look at this bigger picture. Next slide, Darrell. So in terms of here, another consideration that's vitally important is the Climate Act that was passed in 2022 in Stormont. So this is obviously it's a legally binding act that includes a 48% reduction in net emissions by 2030, which again is only 5 years away. And this is a legal requirement in all Northern Ireland departments and councils to exercise their functions as far as possible to do so in a manner consistent with the achievement of these targets. So it means that decisions that are contrary to the commitments within this Act are in a way not adhering to the Climate Act. It was actually really difficult from the application to figure out what was the actual energy the energy usage that this data centre in Campsie was applying for. But from the press releases, we tried to get our figures right because it wasn't really clear within the planning application. But from information within the press releases, we've estimated, and John will go into this further, that for data centres, the energy used by them will, as an increase of 48.37% of the total energy that's used in the north. So I'm going to pass these over to John now to go more in particular to the figures, but that's just an overview of data centres. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Maeve. First of all, I'd like to say thanks to the committee for having us here today. In particular, I would like to thank Councillor Barr for making the proposal and the other councillors who voted to have us here to speak. Thank you very much. I'm here to represent the Save the Moat group. Who are we? Well, we've spoken to the council before. Essentially, we're a group formed 18 months ago when there was a proposal to put 11 or 12 of the highest turbines anywhere in Ireland in the middle of an AONB and the Sperrins, and right in front of the noses of quite a few people in the audience here, 185 metres tall. So why are we here today? Because as we'll go through the presentation, we'll see that the renewable energy has implications. Data centre has massive implications for the use of renewable energy. The main concern here today, and I would just reiterate that we are in favour of renewable energy as long as it's in the right place and used in the right way. So the main reason we're here today is because this one data centre and the other three that have outlined plan permission represent what is a phenomenal increase, as Maeve has just said, potentially 48% increase in total consumption of electricity in Northern Ireland overall. Where does that figure come from? Well, it's not from the planning application because there's very little, if any, reference to energy consumption in the actual application. That data has came from sources like the Dairy Journal. There's also the website of the promoter of it mentions a figure of 300 megawatts usage. So it's a massive amount of energy. So just to, sorry, could we go to the next slide, please? And maybe on to the next one, we've covered that, sorry. So to put it in perspective, if we use the Department of Economy figures, the usage between July 23, June 24, 7244 gigawatt hours. And if you distill that down, all the figures are on the slide there, that averages out at 826 megawatt hours per hour, every hour of the year. Whereas these data centers, if all four are eventually built, and we're estimating from the information we have that there will be at least 100 megawatts each. The total will be 400 megawatts, which equates to an increase in consumption in Northern Ireland of 48.37%. That's an astounding figure. And we're wondering why that was not considered in the application. But to move on and to use the terminology of the wind industry, the next slide, please. Next one after that, we've covered that 48%. So according to the utility regulator, the average usage per household in Northern Ireland is 3,200 kilowatt hours per household, which is 3.2 megawatt hours. And if we, excuse me, if we use the NISRA figures from the 2021 census, there's 60,900 households in the Derry City and Strabane Council area. Throughout all of Northern Ireland, there's 768,800 households. So again, if we work those figures down, that means Derry and Strabane Council area uses 194.88 gigawatts hours per annum. All of Northern Ireland uses 2460 gigawatt hours per annum. The four data centers are developed. They will use 3,504 gigawatt hours per annum. So move on to the next slide, please. So in the parlance of the wind industry in particular, that equates to 1,095,000 households. So essentially those 4 data centers would use 142% of the current usage of all the households in Northern Ireland. So just next slide, please. So that equates to 1.5 times the usage of all the households in Northern Ireland, or 18 times the usage of all the households in the Derry and Strabane District Council area. Those are astounding figures. So, excuse me, next slide, please. So the data center electricity usage relative to current renewable energy generation. Again, we'll go back to the Department of Economy figures, 12 months, July 23 to June 24, 45.8% of metered electricity consumption in Northern Ireland came from renewable sources. So that equates to 3,317 gigawatt hours per annum. And we've calculated the potential use of the data centers, which is 3,504 gigawatt hours. So if we move on to the next slide and you do the sums in that one. That equates to 105%. I think we've tried the next slide. That's, no, just go back again, sorry. Maybe it's my eyesight, yeah. So that equates to 100, the four data centers that developed would equate to 105% of current total renewable energy generation per annum. So if we're going to run them, then we would need to build a few more windmills or solar panels or something. So if we move on to the next slide, please. The Atlantic, a quote from the Atlantic Hub website says that the Atlantic Hub represents an eco-friendly, sustainable data center development. Energy supply is sourced from 100% certified green power. So just as alongside that, the Department of the Economy figures all the renewable energy generated within Northern Ireland year ending June 2024, 82% was generated from wind. It is generally accepted in the wind industry that turbines run at 25% efficiency or thereabouts. In addition, such as we had at the beginning of January, when there's a high pressure system across Northern Europe, as it was around the 11th of January this year, meaning there's little or no generation of electricity from wind turbines. So the other thing is it is well known that all data centers have backup gas generators. So the question is, well, it doesn't seem that the renewable energy is there all the time to run the data centers if they're developed, and they've got maybe gas generators to back it up. So, the question is how much emissions will they actually generate? And the second question is what will happen if there's a high pressure system? Will the electricity go off in people's houses? Who will have the priority? Will it be Will it be the data centers? Will it be businesses? Will it be people in house? Will the lights go out? So that's the big question. So next, excuse me, next slide, please. Of exporting renewables. So page 18 of the programme for government doing what matters for most states, not only supply our own consumer energy needs, but also become a net exporter of renewables. So does this mean that, does this actually mean, is it exporting renewables? Does that mean supplying data centres, or does it mean potentially supplying the other 4 in the Atlantic Hub and Letterkenny? So that's unclear to me, and I would welcome an answer on that if somebody, knows anything about that. Next slide, please. So where is all this going? In the Republic of Ireland, the current percentage, as Maeve has said, percentage of electricity used to power data centres is 22%, predicted to rise to 30% by 2030 if everything in the pipeline is developed. So are we in Derry and Strabane going down the same road? And if so, will the rural people of Derry City and Strabane be asked to pay an additional heavy price in terms of the side effects from the wind turbine developments, such as, visual impact, habitat destruction, carbon release, reduced water quality, health issues from low frequency noise, release of microplastics and toxins, and trihalomethanes, which are carcinogenic. Those are all side effects of the wind industry. So are we going to have to put up with more of that so that the data centers can be run by renewable energy? That's the question. So the next thing is, next slide, please. Yeah. We are constantly being told that renewable energy is cheap and clean, and now approximately half our energy is coming from renewables. So around the time the Ukraine war started, oil and gas prices rocketed. They went up from approximately 14p per kilowatt hour to around 45 pence per kilowatt hour. They've now come down to somewhere in the region of 30 pence per kilowatt hour. Whereas oil and gas prices are down to around the levels that they were at the start of the Ukraine war. So why have they not come down to where they were before? So just to give you an example, some work I've been doing recently, electricity prices for a dairy farmer in Northern Ireland are, depending on their tariff, they're at approximately 25 pence per kilowatt hour. That's a business rate. The same price for a dairy farmer in France is 17 cents per kilowatt hour, which is almost double the price here. So why have we got amongst the highest electricity prices in the world in Northern Ireland and the south of Ireland? So if we move on to the next slide, please. So alternatives and solutions. What are the answers to these dilemmas to keep down our emissions and still progress the economy and progress green energy in a safe manner for the people and for the environment? So given the strategic impacts of data centre development on national energy consumption, energy prices, and Northern Ireland's ability to achieve its Climate Act obligations, we consider that Derry City and Strabane Council should ensure decisions made on data centre development should give material consideration to everything we've just talked about. So really, we need to try and achieve the targets within the Climate Change Act. I'm just going to hand you back to Maeve now so she can summarise, and thanks very much for listening.
So I suppose before we I have a loud enough voice in a way, don't I? But for online, obviously. So just before we suggest some proposals for council, I think to summarise, our renewables transition was planning to get our communities off polluting and expensive fossil fuels, and it wasn't to actually serve the unlimited expansion of one massive industry, being the big tech. And I think the key points on data centres is that Stormont is not providing any policy direction. Councils are having to make these decisions then with no oversight of the cumulative effect of data centres. And our council and potentially other councils, they're not considering key material factors such as climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, and energy security when looking at that, like deciding on decisions around data centre. And when it comes to the Climate Act, all of these things are a recipe for disaster if we're trying to meet our climate obligations that are set out in the Climate Act and for the environment. So you can read there the proposals that we thought might be most helpful in looking at this issue in the future. Obviously, writing to DFI to get that oversight role. And I think the thing, like when we were like really researching this, in point number 2, there isn't actually any clarity on the energy usage that this approved data centre is going to use. Like obviously there's outline planning permission for 3 others, so we really need to get like the figures right. So if council can actually ascertain that, that would be great, so that we're actually, you know, our figures are based on press releases and estimates. So if council could actually do a wee bit of the sums that John here has done, that would be excellent. And then to look at, I think, you know, that there's been a few times where maybe decisions have countered the obligations that are set out within the Climate Act. So I think getting clarity on our obligations in the Climate Act for data centres, but for other bigger matters, would be very helpful. And looking at our local development plan, you know, because when we think about data centres, is that what we want for the Northwest region, for our council area? Like, have we stopped to consider, are these things useful? Do we need them? Should they take priority over energy going to our health service or our schools? And, you know, should we have that discussion before making any other decisions around this? So that's us. Thanks again for having us.
Thank you very much to Maeve and to John for your detailed report and presentation. Members, I'm going to open up if anyone has any questions or wishes to raise any points. I'm just mindful to keep our questions and points on point and keep them moving, but because we don't want to hold these people back. Councillor Harkin is first, and then Councillor Fleming. Sean.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and huge thanks to John and Maeve for really excellent presentations today. And I just want to acknowledge everybody that's in the chamber there who are very eager to see the council engage with this discussion. And the first thing I would say is I think that anybody on the planning committee and our council officers and our council in general needs to have the information that you've just presented to us if they're going to be making decisions about energy, about data centres, about how our water gets used. So this is actually a crucial presentation for the council, and it's being left to campaigners and activists who are doing this on volunteer time to come in here and you know, explain as much as possible to us. So in terms of the data centres, and its relationship to wind farms, right? We want wind farms and renewable energy so that we have clean energy and so that we can actually lower the cost of energy for the council, for businesses, for householders, for farmers. But the problem is, if Amazon and all these big tech companies are basically buying up the renewable energy, that is not going to help us lower our prices. And it'll actually leave us, as John said, dependent on oil and gas over and over again. And it's also the case now, I mean, you mentioned the statistics for the South, which I want to mention, about 21%. In the United States, it's 5%. I think I learned that from you, John. But the United States, they're now talking about building many nuclear reactors next to the data centres in order to guarantee future you know, energy. And which means that if you build nuclear reactors, that poses a whole danger to the environment, people, the workers there, and everything else. So I think that this is an important discussion, and I think we have to get to grips with it. The thing for me is that, look, there is an unwillingness, I think, from Stormont to tackle this or even deal with it. And I think that Stormont is very reluctant to take down the open for business sign at any cost. You look at Dalradian, you look at the gold mine licenses or mining licenses, you look at like this, the industrial farming that has destroyed Lough Neagh and our rivers. You even look at like the issues we're dealing with around, McGee University in terms, there's a lack of regulation for different types of building. So it runs through all the departments and then it runs through councils as well. But it's very dangerous, and the same seems to be applying now to data centres, right, where there is a reluctance to actually give leadership on it and possibly say no, because that might not be a good development in the long term for the vast majority of people. So I think, look, in the south, Reid Smith, who was a TD for People Before Profit, had brought forward legislation to restrict more data centres in 2021 when it was already over 20%. And that was backed by Sinn Féin. And I think they made the right decision to do that. In local councils, Sinn Féin have also supported calls for restrictions on data centres. And I think we need an all-Ireland policy on this, right? Because we can't just say, well, that's in the south and then in the north, we're going to have two different jurisdictions. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to pandemic, when it comes to health services and everything else, we're trying to look at these things on an all-Ireland basis. So I do think that, that's the way we need to view it. Otherwise, it will undo our goals. And look, I've got I endorse the 4 proposals that you have brought forward today, and I hope the council will back them. And then the 2 quick questions that I have are, one, and I suppose this is for officers as well as this is for the council. Why was the council's climate change adaptation plan not a consideration when we were granting permission for the data centre? I think that's very important, and I think it's been asked by yourselves. And why is it that the Stormont Climate Change Act from 2022 wasn't a material consideration in the planning applications? That will be a major contributor of GHGs, such as data centres. So if council officers feel like they can answer those, or if you feel like you can answer them, that would be very, very helpful. But thank you again, and thank you, Chair, for your time, for the time.
You wish to comment, work away, or do you want more questions asked first? Or I see, and there's 2 more questions, right? Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for coming in to speak to us and present this information to us today. I am a member of the Planning Committee, so I'm going to be careful what I say, and I'll try to keep it short and sweet. I would encourage anybody who has any concerns about any planning application, whether it be for a data center, a wind turbine, or anything of that sort, to feed their concerns into the planning process. Contact the planning service, feed it into the planning process, and information like what you've presented to us today will then be fed into reports compiled by planning officers, and that will be presented to the Planning Committee, and we will make a decision on any application that comes before us on the merits of that application. And I would just invite and encourage anybody with any concerns and or objections to feed them into the planning service. But thanks for coming in to speak to us today.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Alderman Hussey, you wish to pass comment as well?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Moving John, for the presentation. First thing I'll say is extremely deep and complicated presentation. And can I suggest that it's more than just a half hour at a committee that's needed within that? In fact, I believe that this requires a seminar type approach, so that all stakeholders can have their input into the debate that you're trying to initiate. You did say, Maeve, I think it was yourself who said it's important to get the figures right. It absolutely is, but that's an admission that you're not even sure of the figures that you're working with. The more important it is then to have everybody on board, including the data center providers, including NIE, whoever it is, of course, NIE owned by ESP or whatever. You referred to emissions. Could you expand on what do you mean by emissions? And I mean, I'm of that generation that remembers all the furore about mobile masts, etc., and emissions from mobile masts, all that sort of stuff. And you know, where's that now? And I think of yourself, John, who said that you know the right place and the right way. And I ask myself, well, where is the right place and where is the right way for renewable energy? Because I mean, I live in an area and I'm surrounded by wind turbines, and they don't bother me, to be very, very honest. I'm a rural dweller, and the turbines around me, quite honestly, don't bother me. That's just me. And I'm not aware of a big outroar from my neighbours. In fact, the chair of committee would be a neighbour of mine, and perhaps he can come back on that as well. So we know that there is a need for diversity. In fact, redirection of where our energy comes from. But there is this debate as to how are we going to do it. And the point that you're making with regard to data centers, and I think there's tremendous economic opportunity. But I suppose, I hope you would agree with that, but it's to do it right. So how do we do it right? And the major issue that you're highlighting seems to be the energy supply. So, you know, what are plans? And I mean, government is pushing AI at a national level, as you know. So, you know, what are the plans from the AI industry to increase the renewable energy supply to deal with the issue that is being suggested they are creating? And on the basis of those comments, what I'm really, I suppose, saying is we need a longer go at this. And as I say, not just half an hour or so on a committee, and, you know, 5 minutes you'll have responded to the three of us that are here, and it'll be gone. It needs more than that, and it needs all the stakeholders on board. And I trust you can agree with that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do you wish to pass comment on the three speakers that have spoken, and then we have two more speakers after that? Yeah.
Well, thanks for your questions, very complex questions. The first question, I think, was from Councillor Harkin. We do think the Climate Act should be a key criteria in the planning decisions because of the amount of energy they use. Councillor Fleming, I think that maybe the council committees and specialist employees should factor in those things, and it seems to be you're maybe pushing the responsibility onto the public to bring that. I appreciate that we should be able to do that, but surely those key legislation should be part of the planning process and should be considered before the public has their input. Councillor Hussey, you asked probably the more complex questions of all. The first one is emissions are generally considered to be carbon dioxide and methane. That's generally, I think that's the generally accepted definition of emissions. You were querying the figures. Now there's four figures involved on the data that we presented. Number one is the international measurement units for energy consumption, which are megawatts or gigawatts or whatever. The other figures were figures from the Department of the Economy. And the third figure was the arithmetic to put those together. So the only figure that I think we're not sure about is the one of how much energy was used. And I mean, there's nothing in the planning application or nothing that I'm aware of from the council that quantifies that in any way. The only data that we're working on is from the Dairy Journal, 19th September, and the Atlantic Hub website. They're the two main sources of information. So I can't verify those. I don't think anybody can verify those. So we think that should be some way factored into how we go forward around these things, which, if they're all developed, will be a 48% increase in Northern Ireland's energy consumption. So, and I do think it's a very complex thing, and we've only really touched on some of the, the basics of it. And what you're suggesting is a great idea, to have a more complex and more a seminar type scenario to debate it. Regarding the right place for the turbines, that's a difficult one. Some people that do annoy, and I mean, there's a lot of research been done on that, particularly in Taiwan, where, the effects of low frequency noise have been established, and there's people actually within our group who would say that they suffer on a daily basis from the problem of noise and low frequency noise. So I understand that that particular aspect is very complex, because it can depend on one speeds, one directions, and you could be beside it and have nothing. You could be 20 kilometers away and be suffering from it. So it's a very complex thing, as the research has shown, particularly in Taiwan. There's also the fact that the state of Alberta and Canada, France, I think now, and is it Slovenia, have all banned windmills pending research into those health risks. So, it's not a standalone sort of an opinion that we have here. There's people looking at this worldwide. So hopefully I've addressed some of your parts of your questions, and I'll hand you back now to the chairman. Thank you. Oh.
Councillor or Maeve, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for the questions and comments. And just to emphasise Councillor Harkin's point around these backup energy sources for the data centres, so like even in Ireland as well, data centres are increasing their gas consumption as their energy demand grows. So like adding further to carbon emissions, and as you've said, like lots of data centres are looking at nuclear energy as well. To comment on Councillor Fleming's point as well around the planning process, and many of us do take part in the planning process, but I suppose we feel it shouldn't be down to citizens then to point out, the material, what we feel should be material planning considerations, such as transboundary issues, our obligations within the Climate Act, and looking at the energy consumption and what that means, for the grid and for ordinary people here. So, we feel that those should be material considerations, and we don't feel that's the role for Joe Blogg and ordinary public. And just a comment on Alderman Hussey's. I think you've asked some really good and big and important questions, Alderman Hussey. And I think right now, big tech is uncritically and incorrectly possibly accepted as an unquestioned force for good. We're just going in this direction. And, we know who owns big tech. It's the riches that's, in the world, it's the billionaires. And, why we are not questioning this direction, I think is down to us, and we need to stop and actually take stock, and because they have an outsized weight of what influence that they have, and I think it is long past time we had a discussion about our collective future and the role that digital technology should play in it. So that's much bigger than this conversation right now, but it is a conversation that we definitely should have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, members. Councillor Fleming, do you want to comment very briefly?
Just briefly in response to your response. When I talked about raising these concerns as part of the planning process, my intention was not in any way to try to shift responsibility in any way. Part of what prompted my comments was that none of these concerns were raised during the planning application of the first data center. So I just wanted to reassure people that they're absolutely free to raise these concerns as part of the planning process. And My comments were only intended to reassure, and I apologize if, they've been misconstrued. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming, for clarification. Three more speakers, Councillor Raymond Barr, Councillor Donnelly and Councillor Gallagher. Raymond?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Maeve and John, for the presentation. A couple of questions. As Councillor Fleming suggested, I'll feed these through the planning process as well. Question one, why was the effect of emissions on climate not addressed in the planning report of EIA determination? Or is this not a material planning consideration? Another question was, why was paragraph 3.13 of the SPPS not considered a material planning consideration, including the requirement to consider reducing greenhouse gases?
Thank you, Councillor Barr. I will ask that we'll get the three speakers and then you can answer the questions if you're content. Councillor Donnelly.
Chair, I'm not a member of the committee, but appreciate the chance to mostly make a comment here. First of all, I'd like to thank Maeve and John and other protectors here. I think what you're doing is very, very important, and it needs to happen. And there's a lot of information in this that my mind is going to need a lot more time to absorb, but it does send shockwaves, and a lot of what's said or a lot of what's insinuated here isn't surprising. But first of all, I'd like to say that with the whole planning system, there's nobody can deny that there's not, at the very least, a perception that people who have genuine concerns are almost being treated or accused as being annoying and like pesky almost, and that needs to change. It's wrong and it needs to stop. And I know that puts some people off engaging. And there was a recent report that I took part on, and it was a significant section of that conversation was how we work things out and move forward. And when the report was produced, there was absolutely no roadmap or any even of that sort of conversation. So, I think it's important that we get to a stage that we can work together and that people's concerns, that they feel that they're valued at the very least. But I think it's good to see that Councillor Harkin has outlined that in 26 counties that Sinn Féin and people before profit do have some concerns, and that's where it's an island here, and rivers don't stop at the border. Energy doesn't stop. Storms don't stop at the border. What affects people in the 6 counties or what affects people in 26 counties will have a knock-on effect. And I think it's shocked to me or surprising to me that 21 or 22%, I think there's two different figures there, that have all metered electricity in the 26 counties is going to data centres. And let that sink in, because that's a phenomenal figure. And I am for renewable energy, but there's problems with renewable energy because the wind turbines, they should be nationalised. They seem to be profit driven. I'm not an expert in that. But what is the point of doing, of having all these wind turbines if they're going to just keep producing data centres, and that's where it's going? It's actually defeating the purpose. The 26 counties, what have the third highest electricity prices in the EU, and I think from that it said 48% above average. Where's the benefits? Where does the benefits of, and I'm not, obviously progress, we have to make progress, and artificial intelligence, as some people said, or as we say, there's a lot of good to it and there's potentially negative. We've seen recently where the US had a plan to, I think it was hundreds of millions, if not billions, in the AI, and the Chinese came in and pulled the rug from under them. So it's all developing here as we speak, but we do have a duty for the environment and to protect that environment for future generations. We've seen the recent Storm Owen, and the damage and the devastation that did right throughout not only this island but the neighbouring islands. And there was in the 6 counties alone, there was something like nearly 300,000 premises impacted by electricity outage, and for tens of thousands of them people, it was out for 10 days. So whilst I am for progress, I think, you know, ordinary people, householders and that have to benefit from it. I suppose the only question that I would have is it, you know, what is to say that these data centres, if there is outages, is it, you know, in the electricity, is it going towards the data centres, or as he's outlined, or will it be going to households and hospitals and that? And just regards the figure of 100 megawatts usage for data centre, what does that mean, or where did you get that figure? But thanks for the presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. And the last speaker is Councillor Gallagher. Paul?
Thank you, Chair, for letting us on. Mine's very similar to Councillor Donnelly's, but thank you for the presentation. Very complex, and indeed potentially alarming. And again, like Councillor Donnelly said previously, we recently had a very bad storm, and we've seen a lot of people getting knocked off the grid, and how that's impacted on them, and the length of time it took to get them back on. When we see, that potential negative impacts that these may have on the grids, I was wondering, just would any of the presenters know, has there been, serious outages in the Free State due to this? And is there like a high risk to our hospitals, to our homes, to vital services not getting access to electricity because of the surge from the grid that it potentially has on these data centres? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. You have comments there from Councillor Barr, Councillor Donnelly, and Councillor Gallagher. If you wish to pass comment on that, thank you.
I'll try and answer the easy ones first. Leave difficult ones to you, Maeve. The 100 megawatt figure, that came from the Dairy Journal on the 19th of September 2024. We have had no information from the planning application to verify that or not. Grid outages, apparently NIE have, Councillor Gallagher, apparently NIE have a plan drawn up where they're going to switch off first when the grid's overpowered. I can't verify that, but apparently there is one there, which would be prudent in any case, but I think especially more so in the light of what's happening with the whole electricity system. The other thing on electricity prices is recently, I think Minister Murphy announced something around what was referred to as socialisation of electricity prices. Now, I'm not 100% sure what that means, but I think it means that Joe Blogs, we all pay for the connections for wind turbines, big businesses, and potentially, I'm sure data centres. So that's coming down the pipeline. That's a further increase. Don't have the details. It was quite a vague announcement, but that's what I think it means. So that's in the general around electricity prices and sustainability. So if it keeps increasing the way it is, how can it keep up? And the other thing is that the Department of Economy figures have referred to consumption as metered output. I don't know, but does that mean that when the data centres start up their generators, their gas generators, does that mean that those aren't and that isn't part of the figures, and it's just putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere? So that's another question I have that hasn't been answered by anybody I'm aware of. So that's the easy ones answered. Over to you, Maeve.
Thank you, John. For in terms of Councillor Barr's questions, we do think that they are material considerations, but I suppose those questions are for Council and for the Planning Committee. So it would be good to know those answers. We we feel that the climate impacts of this data centre should have been assessed. Councillor Donnelly had said like about the numbers, like that figure, that 100 megawatt figure should have been in the planning application. But if the planning committee didn't know that number, then how was it possible for the planning committee to assess the climate impacts? You know, so like, why was it not on the application? Why was it not clarified? You know, suppose we have more questions as well, you know, about this, but, you know, I was surprised, you know, that I think the only climate assessment within this application was around flooding, and there was nothing said about energy, given like the global, you know, impact of data centres, you know, globally on energy, in the Republic of Ireland on energy, and obviously those impacts are going to happen here. From the energy, like, would it affect hospitals? Like, you know, hospitals are critical national infrastructure, so they'll always be, you know, priority. But there have been moves to make data centres critical national infrastructure as well, which is very interesting. So, like, in a way that the energy is potentially going to be prioritised for data centres. You know, why is that? Why is that prioritised beyond householders' energy? Given, you know, people need warm homes, like the health risks of being in a cold home, you know, the health risks of people who rely on, you know, electricity for NG feeding at home or for other healthcare that they have at home. So, yeah, I mean, we probably have more questions than answers, you know, on this decision. But I think the key thing that, you know, we didn't start out to say that we wanted this, you know, that we know that this decision can't be changed within this committee, but we wanted to raise awareness on data centres and for council to think about future decisions on energy and you know, do we as a council region and as a Northwest region want data centres and that big tech domination, you know, for the people here, or what is it that we want? Do we want, because I know that we want a more sustainable environment. I know that we want, you know, cleaner streets, cleaner water, cleaner air, but can we have all those things with an increase in data centres and the energy that comes along with that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciated to Maeve and to John for the presentation, for taking the questions. I do thank the members as well and for their interest and for the questions which was asked, and again from members which are not members of the committee who have attended in person or online, and for the gallery as well for their attendance and support for the ask which is given. Very much appreciated for coming in. It is a very, very large topic, and myself and Alderman Hussey and Councillor McHugh all represent the Derg area, and we know well enough about wind turbines. We have quite a number of turbines there. I think we have more turbines in our area than probably in the rest of the council area combined, when you count those wind farms up, particularly in Ahern and up into the Cargeries there. And we know the impacts that can occur to it. But no, very, very much appreciated, and for the proposal, or for your asks here, and for the presentation. And you are free to go, and we will continue the rest of the meeting. So thank you very, very much. Councillor Boyle, John. Julie's, where is?
I know we're probably figured.
Apologies. That just dragged on a lot longer than I'd like, but it couldn't be sharp.
Just, yeah, take a minute to let you.
Aye. Somebody's locking it out. Trillers as well, and I'm trying to to get him a number.
All right, thank you. It's still okay. Oh, thank you. I think we're still forwarding.
We are. I have one item, members, and that was just in regards to a wee update, but it can be brought back in regards to the use of glyphosate there, in regards to where we do use it, where we don't use it, because we do know that DFI use it in certain places, and maybe we're not using it beside that, and just to get a wee either a wee report back or something like that, because that has been a wee ongoing issue to do with the like of cemeteries and that. So just maintenance of it there. So just to get a wee clarification, just more than anything else, members. That's the sorry, Alderman Middleton, you wish to come in on this?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to concur with you there on that, it's an ongoing issue that we're contacted across all areas that all our councillors cover. But I was just wondering if we can get a paperback, as Keith has suggested, could it also maybe include best practice that's used in other council areas? Because this might give us a good steer. I would really love to see this issue resolved this year and as quick as possible, because it's a really emotive one for our residents who are visiting their loved ones' graves. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, member, happy to bring a further report back to members in relation to that.
Thank you very much, Karen. Do you have Alex? Yep. Yep, we're still all right. Members, item 7 is the matters arising from the open minutes of the Environment and Regeneration Committee held on Wednesday, the 15th of January. Does anyone have anything they wish to raise? No.
Chair, online.
Councillor Gallagher.
Appreciate it, Chair. I'm not on this committee, but I just following it. It's ER 1025, the mineral prospecting licenses. At that meeting, I was saying that a report would come in to this meeting, and I'm wondering, is there any update on that? Appreciate it, Chair.
Yeah, through you, Chair, members, we have been considering the appointment of specialist consultants in terms of considering the application, and unfortunately we haven't got that report ready to bring in today. I know we actually had obviously permission from the committee, and then that was ratified by council in terms of procuring the specialist advice. We're working through that process, and we have also engaged with council's lead finance officer in terms of securing budget, etc. So we will bring the report back in terms of the committee to make sure that that begins as quickly as possible and in time for the process of the consultation on that particular application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Karen. Anyone else, any other matters arising from the open minutes? No. In that regard, members, just wondering, did we weren't able to contact Councillor Boyle?
Trying to get him.
That's all right. No, well, we'll keep rattling on. Right, members, item number 8, standardisation of non-statutory fees with building control and planning service, and that's Cara.
Thanks, Chair. This is to advise members with regard to the standardisation of non-statutory fees within building control and planning service. Members will be aware of the extensive building control and planning services provided by the respective sections within council. And these are statutory functions, with the majority of the associated fees set at a regional level by the Department for Communities. There are, however, a small number of areas where councils can set their own fees, with these typically relating to requests for duplicate property certificates, copies of planning consents, or documents previously submitted or issued. At present, there are a number of differences in the fees charged by the respective sections in respect of the services provided. And more recently, an internal audit review of Building Control Service noted the differences in charges and recommended that these should be standardised across both functions. In consideration of the above, officers from the respective sections met to review the fees and have agreed an amended schedule as per Appendix 1. It should be noted that not all of the fees apply across both sections. Some only apply to building control, with a small number only applying to planning service. And members are asked to approve the standardisation of fees as included within the report and appendix. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Has anyone got Councillor McGinley?
I'll be brief, Chair. Thank you, and thank you, Connor, for the report. We're content to propose the recommendation. It seems like a common sense approach. So thank you for bringing that forward.
Proposed by Councillor McGinley. Have us, Alderman Hussey.
Adam, second.
Thank you, members. That's proposed and seconded. Members, the following items are open for information, and I will just go down through them. And if anyone has comment, raise it as we go through. Item 9 is ENR Directive 6 Monthly Progress Report. Alderman Hussey.
It's just a query, and I'm sorry to have to come back to this, Connor. The final stage of the rollout on the brown bins, we're heading into very shortly, believe it or not, the grass cutting season again. Is there any indication when it's anticipated that that final rollout will be happening? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's imminent. We're waiting on a delivery of caddies coming in. Those have now arrived, so we'll commence that process over the next number of weeks. Again, it will be similar to the process just before Christmas, where it will be, street by street and so on, but it will commence imminently, and we hope to conclude it within 3 months.
Thank you. Alderman Middleton, and do you record attendance of Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and thank you as well to the team for the very detailed progress report. There's a lot to welcome and a lot to be pleased about, and it's clear to see there's a tremendous amount of work being done. So the DUP commend you for this. I was also going to ask about the brown bins. People think I'm probably a bit obsessed about bins, but out in the rural, those brown bins are a necessity. The people who have them and have had them delivered are really hugely thankful, but there are still a number of people waiting, so it's great to hear they're on their way. We never doubted that they were, but it's good to have that in sight. It's great to see the accolades and the funding that we have received, or that the ENR Directorate has received, and it just goes to show how great your endeavours have been. Whilst there's still work to be carried out, it's really great to see the format where we can see how far along you are on each job and how focused you are on each job. So just on behalf of the DUP, I want to thank the team, all of you, for your very hard work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderman Middleton. Members, item 10, building control applications. No. Item 11, which is the DFI coach bay. No. Item 12, DFI disabled parking bay. No. Item 13, Mobile update. Alderman Middleton.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in. And again, thank you to the team for bringing the report forward and putting it into the agenda. It just goes without saying that Mobile is so serious, and it should always be really high up on our priority list of talking about and reading and knowing the details of. Like, I welcome the upcoming consultation, and I await further updates to come. I'm glad to see that 2 public engagement sessions have been planned. I do hope that a wide range of methods will be employed to local people, so that as many local people will know about the engagement as possible, so that we can get a wide breadth, or so that DFI, or so that the department can get a wide breadth of replies. Finally, I am so glad to know that the drinking water, the wildlife and the ecology all remain safe. There's just no words about what's happened, but at least we have the assurance for our local people and for our precious wildlife and ecology that everything is good at present. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alderman Middleton. Content enough. Yep. Thank you for your comments in regards to the Mobile update. Item 14, the flooding issue update. And Julie?
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in again. I speak about flooding every time because it's just so important to so many of our residents district-wide. I've said this one line in particular many times, but as a council and as councillors, we cannot allow for our residents to be afraid when it rains. It is good to see that there are dates in place. Some of them remain quite far away, so I do hope that we can continue pushing, not only as councillors, but as a council, that those dates be brought forward if possible and that work continues to push. I really welcome that the additional properties in Eglinton are having flood prevention methods installed, and also I welcome the ongoing work on the district flood alleviation schemes. We just have to keep flooding high on the agenda, but thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Middleton, for your comments. Item 15 is the active travel delivery plan. Does anyone wish to comment? No. No. Item 16 is the deposit return scheme. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of the impetus in this lies beyond council as to the moving forward of it. It's just a clarification, 3.4, 3.5, 3.6. Milk jugs not included in the scheme, and we did hear from a potential user of those. So if they're not included in this scheme, I presume council might look at an alternative that those can then go to where they can be used. I also noticed glass isn't in that, the old bottle return scenario. Is there any reason for that we're aware of? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. In answer to the first one, the milk jugs are collected through blue bin as is, so we don't see any change to that, and they're not seen as throwaway drinks cans as you go into a shop and buy a can of lemonade or a bottle of mineral and so on. So they're seen as a different type of use, and that the majority end up within blue bins. So that's the reason for that one. In terms of glass, it's a discussion point. The Scottish executive wanted to include glass in DRS, and there was a lot of press about that. It was decided eventually not to include it. There's no final decision, whilst at the moment it's not included, there's no final decision. And it may well be that it could be included at some point, but there are different views across the four nations about including it or not including it. And we'll be guided by, the Northern Ireland scheme is similar to the English scheme. In fact, they're identical, so they will determine the final alternative.
Chair, just I suppose the final what goes round comes round. I'm of that generation who did gather bottles to go to the pictures on a Saturday afternoon.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. Members, that was item 16, the deposit return scheme. Item 17, Glenowin Task Force. Councillor McGinley.
For my good Chair, and thank you. I want to say thank you to Tony and his team for the work that's gone into this task force. It really has been a model of best practice. And I know that the representatives from the Residents Association, Anne-Marie and Joe, are very grateful for the relationships that have now been built between themselves, ourselves as elected reps, and all the statutory agencies that have responsibilities within Glenowin has meant that we have made significant progress. And I think John might agree with me if he's coming to speak on it. I know we have a meeting scheduled in the coming weeks, and the future approach of the task force and how that'll then operate will be decided at that. But it was just to put on record our thanks to Tony and his team. It's been an incredible effort, and just thank you.
Councillor McGinley. Councillor Boyle.
Likewise, in the same vein, Chair, totally concur with Councillor McGinley. I think it's been a very useful exercise, actually. I think it's something that we may well be able to apply in other neighbourhoods perhaps as well, which all have different challenges, and there are evidently, very, very many out there. But as somebody who, I think it was actually me that proposed we try and do this, so I certainly think that all of us as elected representatives who've engaged with the process certainly found it very, very useful. I think also, and probably more pertinently, is that it's something that's very useful for local residents, and moving forward. Obviously, I note the report. Moving forward, it's how we then keep relationships going. I think we have managed to build up very strong personal relationships that perhaps didn't exist beforehand. And so I'm hopeful that that will continue. I expect that it will. I genuinely do expect that it will. But as Councillor McGinley already states, we have a meeting in 2-3 weeks' time, I think, and we'll probably tease out how it is then that we progress and move forward from that, you know. But I certainly get the sense that people are very thankful for the interventions that accrued from the task force. And as I said, it's really something I think that we can build on and we can continue. So again, noted and thankful, and again also to record my thanks and the thanks of my own party colleagues to those council officers, and particularly Tony Monaghan, and keeping the ball rolling and engaging in a very positive manner. That's key. That's the key to this. You know, it's primarily about how we approach things with a can-do attitude, and I witnessed it and I felt it, and hopefully that's something we can continue to progress. So again, thank you for letting me in on that one, Chair. And again, I completely concur with Councillor McGinley. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Boyd and Councillor McGinley, for your comments. Members, I will be looking for a proposer and second to confidential proposed by Councillor McGinley, and it was Councillor Boyle I saw move second. Yeah.